The Taxi with Tammy podcast was created to inform and educate taxpayers on the overly convoluted, complicated, complex, and straight up confusing tax law. On this platform, I break down the tax code in the most relatable, rudimentary form by using real life situations. The tax code is voluminous and I don't know it in its entirety, nor do I want to. With that being said, there may be times where I'm incorrect or simply don't know. Judge me if you like, I'm still going to do my thing. This taxi isn't for everyone, but for those it is for, sip and enjoy. Sincerely, your girl, Tammy M. What's up, y'all? It's your girl, Taxi Tammy, coming to you today with some tea. And I'm going to call this tea today, Know Your Rights. This is basically my experience or an interaction that I had with the IRS that I wanted to share with you guys and hopefully use this as an example for you guys to know how important it is to know your rights. So let's get into it. I had a phone call. I have a client who obviously has some IRS collection issues. Okay, boom. I had a phone call with the IRS agent weeks ago. When I tell you weeks ago, over 30 days ago, I sent her the signed POA by myself and the taxpayer. At that point in time, she accepted it. She provided a ton of information to me about the taxpayer, the situation, and everything that's going on. And then we set up 30 days to get additional information back to her. Cool, no problem. Mind you, this revenue officer, because I'm dealing with collections and they are called revenue officers, this revenue officer called me way past her tour of duty, which was at 8 something at night. I still accepted the phone call, even though she is not to be making calls past her tour of duty. I still accepted the phone call. Okay, we got that out of the way. Moving on to the 30-day mark. The 30-day mark, I called her. I left her a message. The 30-day mark was, I think it was June 13th or something like that. Somewhere in the teens. I called her, left her a message, told her I have information I'd like to submit on behalf of the taxpayer. Never heard back from her. 2 weeks after that, I keep calling her, because there comes a point where I like to stalk and I like to make sure that I have a phone log on behalf of the taxpayer of me showing that I've made effort to get in contact with whatever type of agent I'm working with. Okay, boom. Then there's that situation. So I start stalking for 2 weeks. Finally, she picks up the phone. Again, this is me calling her. This is not her calling me. In the midst of the many phone calls that I made to her, she moves forward and puts a lien on my taxpayer. For those that don't know what a lien is, a lien basically goes to your city, your county, your state, saying, hey, if they have any property or assets, we get our money first. So my taxpayer, in the middle of the 2 weeks, sends me, hey, we got this lien documentation. What can we do? Mind you, I've been calling this revenue officer for within those 2 weeks, never answered the phone. Obviously, she's working on the case because she was able to put a lien on my taxpayer's assets. Okay, fine, no problem. So like I said, finally, call her. She picks up the phone. Hi, officer, don't want to give out any information. Hi, officer, Hi, how you doing? I'm well. I'm calling in reference to such and such case. Cool. She goes on to talk about such and such case, and she says, wait a second. Let me see if I have your POA on file. And I'm sitting there like, okay, cool. Yeah, I know she has a POA. We spoke. I faxed it over to her. I have my fax confirmation. Side note, always keep your confirmations. Do not throw them away. If you can do it electronically, that is best because they like to lose paperwork. So she checks in her file. She was like, oh, I see that I have a POA here. Please, y'all, listen to the words that I'm saying. I see that I have a POA here, but it's really, really light and I can't read it. And so I said, okay, no problem. She goes, so I'm going to document that no POA was received. No, baby, you're not going to document that no POA was received because you just told me that you received the POA. You just can't read it. It's too light. So I said, no, this is me speaking to the officer now. I told the officer, no, that's not what you're going to document. And I'm going to let you guys know why I was so combative with this in a minute. So I told the officer, no, that's not what you're going to document. You're not going to document the fact that you didn't receive a POA because you did receive a POA. You're now telling me a month and a couple of weeks later that it's that you're not able to read it and that you would like a new one sent to you. I said, so we're going to document things properly. You received a POA. You're going to write the date that you received the POA. And at that point in time, you're going to say it took you about 6 to 7 weeks to tell the POA that it's ineligible. That's the right documentation. Not saying that it's not received because you have it in your hand. She said, well, it either being eligible or not being received is the same thing to me. So I responded by saying it's absolutely not the same thing. And we started going back and forth about what the definition of not being received and things being ineligible mean. And at that point in time, I stopped the conversation. I said, I will get you a new POA from the taxpayer myself, and I will fax that over to you. Have a good day. And I hung up the phone. Because what I'm not going to do is argue about something as simple as that with an officer when the overall goal is literally for you and I, meaning the officer and me as a representative, is to resolve the taxpayer's issues. It's not to sit here and argue over definitions at all. So plain and simple, what I tried to do was just stop the fight, stop the going back and forth, and let her know that I'm going to submit a new POA to her. It's really that simple in my eyes. She has her activity record and I have my activity record. And the concern about the activity records, like I said, I was going to go back to it. So the concern about the activity record is when I work with a revenue officer or if I work with a revenue agent, I prepare for appeals. I do not prepare for what's going to happen in this situation at this moment in time. And for a revenue agent officer or a tax compliant officer, their proof is their activity record. And unfortunately, they can write whatever they want in their activity record. If I sat there and allowed her to write in her activity record that she never received a POA, that would mean that my taxpayer has been unresponsive all of this time. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. So when she goes to when she goes to appeals, or we decide to take the case to appeals, it shows that my taxpayer was unresponsive, which means that they were unwilling to work, which means that they have less leverage to win their case in appeals. So I always train people to keep your own activity record, to keep your own phone log. I don't care what they write, as long as you have yours as well. Now you both have an activity record that will stand up in court. That's why a paper trail, when you're faxing things, is super duper important. Make sure that you have all of those confirmations and make sure that you summarize the conversation that you had in your own activity record, writing the date and the time and having the phone record reflect that as well. So that is my tip of the day when it comes to talking about activity records. So anyway, let's get into the tea. I would say within 15 seconds, I see the US Gov number pop up on my phone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's calling me back. What could she possibly want?
Hello?
Homegirl decided that she was going to call me back with an attitude and a vengeance. She called me back, and the first thing she said was, Who do you think you are hanging up the phone on me? And I sat there like, wait a minute. Hello? Are you talking to me? She repeated herself. I said, who do you think you are hanging up the phone on me? Don't you dare hang up the phone on me. So I started giggling at this point in time. Because who are you talking to, ma'am? Who are you talking to? Who told you that it was okay to call me with such anger in your heart? And why are you so angry? So I said, listen, I'm not here to argue with you, and you're not here to argue with me. When it comes to the taxpayer, we're supposed to be here to work on helping the taxpayer. But instead you want to argue, and I'm not arguing with you. I told you what I was going to do. And that's that. And she continues to want to go on and go on. I said, let me explain something to you. I'm not going to argue with you, old lady. At that point, I got a little spicy because she was getting spicy with me. So I told her, I'm not going to argue with you, old lady. So there's only one or two things that you could do right now. Actually, only one thing that you could do right now. I said, you can give me your manager's number. She was like, go look it up. I said, okay. So at this point in time, I'm going to let you know I'm recording your conversation. So I asked her again. I said, can you give me your manager's number, please? She starts going off on a tangent. I'm not listening to her tangent at that point. I'm not listening. So she starts going off on a tangent. I'm not listening to her tangent at this point because she's in the wrong in so many ways. And I'm going to show you how I had to read her rights and calm her down. But I'm not listening to her tangent. I asked about 30 times, can I get your manager's number? Can I get your manager's number? And I wasn't even paying attention to what she was saying. This lady kept refusing to give me her manager's number. Mind you, as tax professionals, you should know this. One of the very first meetings or conversations with any revenue agent or revenue officer or a tax compliance officer, they are required to give you their manager's number. One of the very first conversations, they are required. Do you hear me? They are required to give you the manager's number. And this lady refusing to do so is a violation of a taxpayer's right. Or telling me to go look it up, like she said, is a violation of the taxpayer's right. So in my head, I'm just racking up all of the violations that she has against her as she's caught in her feelings with me hanging up the phone. Yeah. She's going off, whatever. So then finally, I said, let me explain something to you. I said, you can either give me your manager's number or I can report you for violating a taxpayer's rights. And she's like, what do you mean by that? I said, well, let me break it down for you real quick. Number one, you're required to give me a manager's number. You're not telling me to go look it up. You're not supposed to do that. But you're required to actually give me your manager's number during our very first conversation. Number two, during our very first conversation, you called me hours after your tour of duty, which is something that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to be working past your tour of duty. Number three, if you did not receive my POA, how would I know all of this information about the taxpayer that I received from you? If you did not, quote unquote, receive my POA, you would not have been able to provide me with all the information that you provided me on this case because it would have been a violation of my taxpayer's rights. So with that being said, I feel like you violated my taxpayer's rights and I'm going to go forward and report you. Immediately, all of her yaka stopped, yada yada yada, blase, all of that stopped. And sis said, who do you work for? I started laughing at that point. Because she should have asked that first. Not even that she should have asked that. She should have never acted out in a manner that would bring it full circle for her to even inquire about who I work for. So I very kindly let her know that I used to work for the government, the IRS, as a revenue agent, which is steps above a revenue officer, by the way. As a revenue agent, a field agent at that. And for 7 years, and I'm fully aware of how this game goes and how I'm not going to play it with her. At that point in time, she let me know that her manager was on vacation and she gave me her acting manager's number. All of that yaka, all of that, going in, disrespect, but all of that stopped immediately. And this is why I tell you guys that it is super duper important to know your rights. This is why I tell you guys that it's super duper important to know your rights. Because I was able to push her in a corner where she couldn't talk anymore. She was going on and on about how she felt disrespected, even though she disrespected me first, and I hung up the phone because I refused to go back and forth with her. But I was able to push her in a corner her about all the violations and about the write-ups that she would receive, possible job loss, about the violation of rights. And at that point in time, when I did that, all of that stopped. She gave me her manager's number. I told her again at that point in time, because she kept asking further questions about my position with the IRS and, who do I still know? What location did I work in? Because she got scared. No, I'm not answering on these questions. I'll work with your manager going forward. And I hung up the phone. Immediately called the manager, left a message. The manager called me back. As I'm on the phone with the manager, and this is what I don't like to do. I don't like to get managers involved because I know that you're working for not a lot of money. And this lady sounded older. She sounded like she had been on the job for a very long time. And she sounded like she may have possibly loved her job or at the point where she hated her job because she's been on the job for so long, which happens to tons of people in the government. They're there because of security. They're there because they've been there for so many years. They're there because the job does not require much from them on a daily basis. But that's another podcast for another day. So I get in touch with the manager. I explain to the manager what's going on. The manager immediately tries to defend her officer, because there is a difference. Tries to defend her officer. And I let the manager go on and speak and talk about how she feels, that would be a true violation of the taxpayers' rights if she didn't receive a POA that was legible. Sorry, I keep saying eligible. That is legible. And I let her give her speech, and I said, you are absolutely correct. I said, the problem with that is I've already had previous conversations with your officer, and she's already given me tons of information based off of the original POA that I sent to her. So with that being said, her is now saying 7 weeks later, 8 weeks later, that the POA is illegible. Gosh, this word is killing me. It's taking me out. It's crazy to me. Immediately, the manager was like, you know what? I tried to stick up for her. But with that being said, you are absolutely right. She also went on to tell me that I will be working with her going forward, opposed to working with the officer. So this is why I'm telling you guys, knowing your rights is super important, because what really happened, and me being in the system and working for the IRS for so many years, I can tell you what happened. Sis didn't work on the case or do real work, on the case, or was unprepared to do real work on the case all of this time. So instead of her saying, hey, I haven't really moved on this case, can I call you back next week? It's a holiday weekend. I'll call you back next week, and we could talk about the case then. What she tried to do was bring the case back to square one with the POA. And I wasn't having it, because work had been done on the case. She tried to bring it all the way back to buy herself time to make it look like in her activity record that the taxpayer and the representative had done nothing on the case and she was waiting for us. No, baby. That's why I have my own activity record. That's why I have my own call log. That's why I have my own everything, to make sure that I have documentation of what's going on as well. So, like I said, the name of this podcast today is to know your rights. Y'all, it is so important to read Pub 1 and Notice 609 that is sent to you by the IRS with the notifications that you get, or whatever notice or publication that they send to you, and to know that thing front and back, so then when it comes down to stuff like this, you're able to corner them on what they did wrong and be able to move on with your case in accordance with the law. Because a lot of times these agents and officers like to cut corners, like to do things on their own terms, and that's just not how this works, because it doesn't work out for taxpayers at the end of the day. So if you're a representative or a tax professional listening to this, or if you are a taxpayer listening to this, I cannot stress enough, go and learn your rights, or hire somebody who understands your rights, that can speak up for you and that could represent for you, i.e., that's me. You can find me at www.taxauditresolution.com for representative services and a ton of other services when it comes to taxes. But I can't express to you guys enough how important it is to know your rights and don't let these people play in your face. That's literally all I got for you guys today. Talk to you next time. Sip your tea wisely. Have a good one. It's Tax Tea with Tammy, baby.